Josh Heupel and the football staff and the football team go to the practice field for spring practice. Where are we? Rob, jump in here as well. Where are we putting value on spring practice? Are we negating value of spring practice more than ever? Or are we just negating a spring game? What do we think of spring practice in college football right now?
I think it's going downhill for years and years. I mean, me and you are old and been doing this a long time, and I can remember the spring game. I wouldn't say it's a big deal, but I mean, you got excited about it. Maybe fans were excited about it. I mean, it was for us. I mean, it was. It certainly way below a regular season game, but I mean, you were hoping to see some things and maybe be able to form some opinions. And it's just been the spring game in particular, let alone spring practice, but the spring game in particular has been worthless for over a decade or more now. Would you guys not agree?
I think the spring game has. I think spring practice, there's a ton of value there for your team, the 14 practices, but the spring game I think has gone downhill for sure.
But Hubbard, I've seen you talking. You talked about this. You written about it a little bit, and I think it would have so much more value if it was in the summer.
I agree. OTAs, yeah. I
mean, I've seen Hubbard beat that drum some, and it just makes so much more sense. I mean, if guys are getting paid now, then let's end the charade. Let's actually try to make the sport better.
Well, I mean, whether it's in March or whether it's an OTA style in June, which I agree with, I'd be fine with that. I mean, anytime you get out there and you put a helmet on and shoulder pads and shorts and you go through the fundamentals and all that, and you get some work. I mean, 11 on 11, all that type of stuff. Not 11 on 11, but O-line, inside run, all that type of stuff. That's valuable, no matter when it is. I just think that, in terms of nationally, the game, Austin, the historical orange and white game or the red and white game or wherever you are around the country. I mean, that everybody's canceling it right now. And I mean, I'd be surprised if Tennessee has one in a couple of years. I mean, just at the rate everybody else is canceling.
Yeah. I mean, I go ahead, Austin.
I was going to say, I thought it died when they were doing Circle of Life out there and giving points for it back 10 years ago. Well, I know where Rob's mind was thinking. You went away from being a game and ended up started being like the NBA All-Star game. Like, you start doing all this stuff that's non-competitive, and I think you can't insult the fans. And then when you took away the autograph signings, as Hubs has talked about several times, then how incentivized are fans to go?
Well, I mean, and I think that's what you're looking at. I mean, coaches don't like them. Coaches aren't interested in them. So how do you create an event that makes any sense for the fans? I mean, Kalen DeBoer at Alabama said, well, we'll do something for the A game. We're not sure what it is, but we'll do something. We'll see what Tennessee comes up with. And obviously a lot of people have canceled theirs. Let's take the game out of it and talk about spring practice that starts on Friday. I've written about this, biggest offensive question, biggest defensive question. I got a little bit coming up on Wednesday. Who you buying stock in? What's at your top of your list that you want to see, Austin, in spring practice? What are you going to be gravitating to? Not just on Friday, but throughout spring practice here. Where are your eyes going? What little bit we get to see?
Well, my eyes are going to go to these freshmen because if you're not going to go heavy to the portal, I mean, the Marion Dyes, the Isaiah Campbells, the David Sanders have got to play. So my eyes immediately go there. Now, what I'm most interested to hear about, and again, we won't see it because we're not going to be out there for any of it, is how are the receivers looking? Because at the end of the day, this team needs Mike Matthews, Chris Brazzell, Braylon Staley, any of those freshmen that are now here to really take a step and hit the ground running. I think the receiver position is going to be the position that dictates whether Tennessee is the same as far as being right there in the CFP conversation and having a shot to get back in the tournament again next year or not.
What about
for me? It's the offensive line. Kind of a lot of the same thing Austin said about wide receivers for the offensive line. You've had the Spraggins and the Mays and they've been here for so long. Dane Davis has been here for so long. Carrick the last 2 years that. You're going to have to play new guys, obviously. And Tennessee went out and got 2 transfers on the offensive line. What do they look like? How they adapted to this scheme? David Sanders on the offensive line. Who's lining up at center? We're not going to get all those answers on Friday, obviously, but for reasons Austin said about the wide receivers, that's what I'm going to say about the offensive line. I mean, it starts up front, and there's a lot of questions about the front line in front of Nico.
Rob, where will your eyes go spring practice? What are you looking for most?
I mean, I just got to pile on. I mean, receivers. I mean, it would be at the top of the list for me. And again, like AP said, nobody's going to be able to see it. It'll take place in a vacuum. But Mike Matthews, I mean, is the guy that would be, if you forget about positions, like the one dude, because of the offseason controversy and the hype that he came in with, and just how dynamic that position has been for Tennessee. Not last year, obviously, but the track record of what Heupel has been able to do with guys there. And so, yeah, receiver, obviously offensive line goes without saying when you're losing dudes. I mean, AT, how crazy is it to see, when Cooper goes from being, Cade's little brother to, a baby-faced guy to, 5-6 years later. I mean, he's a guy you can't, this old grizzled veteran that's walking out the door, man. That was a fun transformation to see.
Yeah, I mean, Eric talked about how long they've been around, Rob. I mean, I'm going to quote a movie here, but like the old Pirates of the Caribbean, part of the ship, part of the crew, you slowly become part of the ship, right? Like that's how long they were around. And so now all of a sudden it's like, wait a minute, we're forced to change. They're forced to change. There's no more Spraggins, no more Cooper. So what does the O-line look like? I mean, Eric brings up a good point. Again, I'm more fascinated to still see the receivers because I don't think they're as deep as a unit. I think the offensive line has some depth, and I think there's some talent there. In theory, I think they could be better this year than they were a year ago. The question is, what does it look like? Who is your center? Who's making those calls? Is it going to be Sam Pendleton and they put somebody else at guard? Is it William Satterwhite? Who is the center? Because I think at the end of the day, it starts with that position naturally because that's where the ball's snapped from. But I think the importance of who that is will go a long way as well.
I'm surprised none of you referenced defensive backs and none of you referenced the cornerback position. I mean, and again, I agree with you. I agree. And I think that's the core of what this spring practice is about. This is a better roster than it was when Josh Heupel obviously got here. This is a better roster than it was, heading into Josh Heupel's second year in terms of talent throughout the deal. There's as many questions in this spring practice as we've had in a Josh Heupel spring practice, outside from year one when everybody was trying to figure out what in the hell his offense was and how you played it, how you went fast and all those types of things. But you start looking at it, offensive line, you're looking for a center, a position you've not been able to find the answer to behind Cooper Mays really the whole time. Okay, we talked about receivers just now, and that's 100% right. Flip it over to the defensive side of the ball. The catalyst for Tennessee's growth defensively a year ago was Ricky Gibson and Jermod McCoy. I mean, we knew the defensive front was going to be good, right? You thought linebacker they were going to be okay, and then obviously you had the Peely injury. But the difference was they could play on the corners and what they could get done there. And now McCoy's out, not going to go through spring ball. We don't know what Ricky Gibson's status ultimately is going to be here. You got Jalen McMurray, and then who?
Trey Poteet. It's freshman. I mean, especially with Beasley, I think will bounce around, play some safety, play some corner.
Why would he do that now with the uncertainty of Ricky Gibson? That's just my. I know that was the plan kind of early on, but there's just no depth at corner. So why would you bounce Caleb Beasley around, AP?
Well, maybe they don't. Again, I think that he'll get a look at both, but we'll see. Again, I think it depends on how spring's going, how they feel like guys, like Trey Poteet, are doing. Obviously, they've got a lot of inexperience there that will be forced upon them. But guess what? They're going to have inexperienced at receiver, so it's going to be inexperienced receivers versus inexperienced corners all spring ball.
Yeah, and then you're looking for a backup nickel. You don't have a backup nickel on this roster. Who was the guy behind Boo Carter? I don't think you got one. And that's
maybe one of those freshmen, right?
Yeah, that's to the point of what this spring makes this spring pretty fascinating from that standpoint. I don't think you solve all those answers, but you got to come out of this. You got to come out of spring practice with a pool of guys that you say, okay, we can get this guy ready. We think this guy can get ready, and that type of thing at a lot of positions. Because again, I think across the board, it's a better roster, but it's as many questions as they've had.
Well, and how many? I mean, where do they come out? What do they come out of spring looking for? Everybody assumes they're going to try to go find a receiver, right? Do they go try to find a corner, or do they feel decent enough about it? Do they have to go find a linebacker? What positions do they try to attack in the spring? I don't think there'll be like an influx of like 6 guys they're going to add, but they may add 2 to 3 players. Who is that, and what positions are they?
Is it fair to say your original question, Brett, where your eye is going to go Friday when you get out of the spring practice? Is it fair to say Ricky Gibson, seeing if number one's out there? I mean,
sure. I mean, I think that's. I mean, just from a body count standpoint, you're definitely going to go make sure that he's out there. That's the first place you
take and roll
to see what that looks like. And that's a whole different topic for a different podcast on what should happen with the spring portal window or shouldn't happen with the spring portal window. But this is the world we're living in now. So you got to go check those things. But yeah, you're going to look at there. I mean, there's a lot of things to look at. This is what spring has turned into with a turnover in your roster, but you're also bringing in 22, 23 new players, and it's all about the newness, and we'll see what that newness looks like starting on Friday morning when Tennessee gets cranked up on the practice field.